Welcome to this Broadland Futures Initiative presentation concerning the next phase of project work. This covers the identification of flood risk management actions, also termed options, the methodology for the appraisal and then selection of the best or preferred actions. These preferred actions, extending over the next 100 years, will make up the Broadland Futures Initiative, or BFI plan. This figure provides an overview of the whole BFI plan creation process. Before describing the next phase of work, I'll recap on what's been done so far. Starting at the top, under the heading What is Happening, we've already produced several background reports describing the BFI plan area and the current sources and extent of flood risk. We've also produced a report that starts to identify how climate change may affect future flood risk. To understand this in more detail, we're in the process of creating a new computer-based model of the rivers and coast, so we can see how flood risk will change in future due to the climate, or through our intervention to manage the risk of flooding. Next, under the heading What Matters Most, last year we undertook extensive public consultation to help identify the most important characteristics of the BFI plan area and the desired nature of the plan itself. From each of these characteristics, we proposed one or two objectives for the BFI plan. These recommended objectives, 13 in total, were agreed by the elected members forum in September last year. Having established the nature of the threat we face and our priorities, the next phase of work comes under the heading, What can we do about it? This comprises first identifying possible actions and pathways to manage flood risk. I'll talk more about pathways shortly. And following this, the appraisal of the identified management actions and pathways. Appraisal in this case means assessing the costs, benefits and other relevant factors so we can provide decision makers with evidence on how far the different management actions fulfill the BFI objectives. Making plans for the future can be difficult if we don't really know what that future will be like. This is certainly the case for climate change. There's uncertainty because we don't know precisely how patterns of temperature, rainfall and sea level will respond to global heating. Also, we don't know how successful society will be in curbing our current emissions of greenhouse gases that drive global heating. Such uncertainty, increasing over time, is shown in this figure depicting sea level rise over the next 100 years for the coast around the BFI plan area. The lower blue line shows the amount of sea level rise if we manage to keep global heating limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as intended by the Paris Agreement and the COP discussions in Glasgow last year. However, the red line shows the amount of sea level rise if we continue without curbing emissions and allow 4 degrees of heating. Therefore, we know that in 100 years' time, sea level rise will be at least 0.5 metre higher and possibly 1 metre higher. The BFI plan, therefore, needs to be able to respond to a range of possible outcomes over its 100-year duration. It will do this by adopting a so-called adaptive approach, also termed adaptive pathway. The idea of the pathway is that our plan can follow a certain route in future, but at critical points this route branches, and depending on circumstances and our expectations at that time, we'll need to decide which route to follow. The intention is the BFI plan will identify combinations and sequences of flood risk management actions that are best able to respond to the range of change and possible impacts that we face. The idea of an adaptive pathway is illustrated by this diagram showing those identified for the Thames estuary. Starting today, here, the different colour lines show the different pathways, decision points and combinations of flood risk management actions to be implemented should sea level rise be expected to rise by increasing amounts, as shown here, 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 here and here. Using the pathways approach, we can accommodate uncertainty and ensure that the optimal amount of resources are invested in managing flood risk. Turning back to the BFI, Before focusing on the possible different ways of managing flood risk, there's still some work to be done with our objectives shown here. In developing the BFI plan, the objectives are important because they define what we want to see happen in future as a consequence of us taking action to manage flood risk. We can use the objectives to compare the impacts and outcomes of different flood risk management actions through seeing how far the objectives are met in each case. In simple terms, the actions that best meet the objectives are those that we should be adopting for the plan. But at present, it will be hard to use the objectives shown here in this way because they're written in quite broad terms. Therefore, we need to make the objectives more SMART. This acronym meaning specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. For us, it's the measurable aspect which is of particular importance. The proposal is that we have one or more indicators for each objective that we can score the candidate management actions against. From this, we can then rank the different management actions in terms of how well they meet the objectives. The second important feature of the objectives at present is that they are all assumed to be of equal importance. Now that may be correct in how we want the objectives to be applied. Alternatively, it may be that people think one objective is more important to achieve than another, and so that objective should carry more weight when comparing the performance of different management actions. Therefore, we propose to work with the Elected Members Forum to explore whether individually and as a group you think there is a hierarchy of objectives that we should use in the appraisal. Having clarified the objectives, the next stage will be to identify the range of actions that could possibly use to manage flood risk. There are potentially many actions that could be taken, and this diagram shows just a few. It highlights that actions can aim to manage flood risk at different geographical scales, starting at the broadest river or coastal catchment, moving down to the community or even the level of the individual property or asset. Management actions can include traditional built structures such as barriers and embankments designed to divert or hold back floodwaters. But it can also include communities being better prepared, such as through receiving flood warnings or being able to recover quickly should flooding occur. Some types of action often need to work in combination with others. For example, embankments and pumps working together in low-lying areas. Thinking over the 100-year timescale of the BFI and the idea of adaptive pathways mentioned earlier, some actions may easily follow another, whereas others may be precluded from following on. To identify the actions available to us, we'll look at what's been done and considered previously within Broadland, the wider UK and internationally. We'll also invite the public to make suggestions based on their experience and local knowledge. Potentially, there are a huge number of actions and permutations of actions available to us. To keep these to a manageable number for detailed appraisal, we propose to screen the initial long list of actions against the BFI objectives to reject those that have least promise. It's important to remember that we will be considering management actions at a strategic level, and so we'll not be looking to define them in a lot of detail. That said, not all flood risk management actions will be appropriate for all parts of the BFI plan area. For this reason, we propose to divide the plan area into several management units based on factors including the dominant source of flood risk and the character of the land. Initial work has identified the 11 management units shown here. The appraisal of the management actions will take place at the level of the management unit, these forming the building blocks for the overall BFI plan. It's proposed that we'll undertake further work to confirm or modify these management units. Having identified and screened the possible flood risk management actions, and also having identified the management units, the next stage will be to appraise the actions and action combinations over the 100-year time span of the BFI plan. Using our new computer model of the rivers and coast, we will predict how the different management actions will change the frequency and extent of future flooding. We'll then identify how such changes, together with other impacts arising from each action, measure up against the different BFI objectives. This appraisal will need to be repeated for the range of different climate change projections. We may also want to consider different social and economic scenarios to ensure that our plan is adaptive to uncertainty about these factors. Following this appraisal, we'll have a large database of information on the relative merits of the different flood risk management actions and action combinations for each management unit and in different circumstances. From this database, we'll need to pick out the optimal sequence of management actions that together will comprise the adaptive pathways that will be the basis of the BFI plan. It's anticipated that this process will be undertaken using specialist optimization software. That concludes this BFI presentation describing the identification and appraisal of flood risk management actions. Thank you for watching and listening.